Okay.
We're on.
So now, Larry, one thing that I'm very intrigued about is this whole issue of the Templars and their treasure, what was ever in the vault. And you can see, going back, starting with like the Holy Blood, Holy Grail guys, all the way into the Dan Browns of today, who's obviously cribbing a lot of Holy Blood, Holy Grail for his work.
Well, maybe and maybe not.
Yeah.
But, I understand what you've said on that, but I'm not sure that he plagiarized anything, really.
Yeah,
I think he just did some good research. He just came up with some of the same answers that Holy Blood, Holy Grail came up with.
Right,
which is fair enough.
Yeah. And the thing is that this issue of the Templars and their treasure, it's almost like you can look at that moment when the vault is opened. And this is another question that's not even looked at. When that vault is opened, it's almost like whatever's going to be found there is going to be the cornerstone of whatever conspiracy you're selling with your plot, let's say. If you think the Holy Grail is in the vault, if you think the ancient scrolls of Jesus are in the vault, or if you think it's the Ark, if you think it's treasures of the ancient world generally, whatever. There's a general exploitation of ambiguity, let's say, about what may or may not have been in the vault.
Well, exactly. A lot of the books that you're reading today, which probably has a lot of validity to it. What is the Holy Grail? A lot of people thought it was a cup.
Mm-hmm.
I have a tendency to believe it's a bloodline.
Now, what makes you convinced of that? Was it primarily Holy Blood, Holy Grail?
No, I think there's other books and other things that have been written to show that. Well, what's interesting, Leonardo da Vinci, in his painting, how many cups do you see on the table?
No large cup that would be equivalent to the Grail.
None.
Only this small water cups that they have after the meal.
That's it.
Right.
Also, I think so much has not been written about Jesus in his young life.
Well, that's another big factor.
A big factor. And I have a feeling that the 4 books of the Gospel was picked for whatever reason to suit the needs of the Catholic Church at that time. And I happen to be Roman Catholic, so I can say that without being prejudiced.
Right.
But what happened to the other books?
The other 50 Gospels that
why weren't they? And actually, Mary Magdalene actually has a Gospel.
Right, Gospel of Mary. Right.
Some of the treasures that they brought back, I have a feeling is more actually in treasure, gold, silver, maybe not necessarily silver, but a lot of gold. Mm-hmm. The Templars got awful wealthy awful quick. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that most of the Templar all the knights in those days had to be from royal blood.
Right.
Okay, you could not be a peasant and be a knight. You can be a groom, and you can be, some kind of a helper, but you could not become a knight.
Right.
So, and I know that some of those knights turned over a lot of their wealth to the Templars.
To join, you had to immediately give up all your personal wealth.
Exactly. So a lot of them actually, I think, gave to the Templars. Naturally, the Templars are the forerunners of the banking system.
Right, they created the whole check,
exactly.
International check and banking.
So
credit
the Templars within themselves were very, I think when they first started out, they were doing the work for the common people going on the crusades to the Holy Land, to protect the roads,
right,
so to speak. Although, how can 5 knights protect the roads?
9 knights originally, right?
Yeah. But there was 5 original.
Right.
9 went over, but the original 5.
How can they protect the roads if that's what they're really doing?
How did they do that?
Right.
Even 9 couldn't do it. 20 couldn't do it. So
right.
let's keep everything in its proper place. I have a feeling that they actually stayed in the stables of the stables as we know of
Solomon's
as
stables.
the temple, the first
Underneath
temple.
the Al-Aqsa.
And they actually did a lot of digging. And I think they found an awful lot of wealth that they brought back with them. I think they might have brought back also some historical facts on some things that has possibly been distorted, that we have distorted today. So the Templars, a lot of people think they're very ruthless in their conquering. They were, but who wasn't? It was the sign of the times.
Right. You really didn't have a choice.
That's right. You got to understand that they stood for Christ, the cross. Everything else was infidels. So how they died made no difference. It didn't make any difference how they just killed them.
Yeah.
You know? Naturally, it was strictly a bloodbath when they went into Jerusalem. Literally.
Oh yeah, when they finally took Jerusalem.
And they did women and children,
right.
Which I think was a little excessive. But again, we weren't there. Things could be a little distorted. I don't know. Certainly, they had a code, a very honorable code, that has been put by the wayside by a lot of people of modern today.
So-called modern Templar.
Yeah, we could pick that up again.
Right.
That code.
How are you, gentlemen?
Good news.
Hello. And the jewels and the stuff that they probably discovered, who knows?
Right.
There's also a story about where they actually came over to North America.
Yeah, there's a lot there. A lot of smoke, but there's some fire too.
But they actually found a grave in Massachusetts.
Right, yes, I've been
with a Templar
and I've been
sign
to
on there.
The
now,
Newport Tower as
how
well.
Did that
is very
get there?
Suspicious.
So
right.
how did they get there?
Right.
So the Templars is a very interesting subject to study. I think there's more to it than just national treasure.
Yeah, that's a pop culture synthesis. Many different factors.
Exactly. I personally think, and this is where some of them are going to raise their eyebrows, I think that the Masonic movement came out of the Templars. And the reason why I think that is in the first degree, when I took my first degree, I was thinking to myself, what secrets do I know that would put a penalty on me to have my tongue cut out, and me cut apart, and thrown all over the place, and through the four corners of the world.
Right.
What secrets do I have? I didn't have any secrets. But if I had a secret to say, I am helping a fellow knight to escape the persecution, now I have a reason to be crucified by somebody to say, hey, you divulged a secret you shouldn't have done. So I got a feeling that the Masonic movement more or less came out of the Templars, and I'm talking back, 1,000 years ago.
Right.
Everyone says Templar to me, or a Masonic movement to me, 17
and the
17,
official Anderson Constitution,
1717.
blah, 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 right.
I think it's a bunch of hood.
That's the English line that can be traced back to
but
that
they
point.
did that deliberately.
And they specifically want to undermine the Scottish connection because they want to be seen as the one.
That's right. Which is a bunch of hooey.
Right.
But I really think that the Masons came out of the Templars. That's my feeling.
I
could be wrong.
I would agree with that too, based on my own research, without any agenda to prove them right or wrong, just looking at what I see to be the facts.
Yeah.
The line of descent from the Templars into the post-Templar quasi-knight orders, then into the Rosicrucian era, then into the kind of elite circles of the aristocracy that then would become the upper echelon of the craft masonry of the English order.
Yeah.
There's really a very direct line there. The only reason you want to cut it off and say, oh, only at the end with these craft English guys, that's only if you're English and you want to back just the English position.
Well, see, for example...
But the line's pretty strong if you have
Well, see, there's more to the Templar. I belong to what they call the Allied. And I know that I believe in the Scottish Rite, there is a charge in there about the Red Cross of Babylon. Now, the Red Cross of Babylon in the Allied, because there's 5 degrees in the Allied, into the York Rite. But that was actually that degree was actually done by the Templars at one time. So there's a lot of degrees or orders that came out of the Templars that a lot of us kind of seem to forget, or haven't really done our proper research and really know the background of some of these orders and some of these degrees.
Right.
And where did all this come out of? And especially in the Christian part of it, a lot of it came out of the Templars.
Now, have you read that book, Hiram Key?
Oh, yes.
Now, see, this is interesting to me. The Knight Lomas, Hiram Key type guys, you know, they're coming in the wake of the HBHG, you know, thing. I think that the Holy Blood, Holy Grail had much more of a solid, you know, research credibility to much of what was going on there. Obviously, when they get to the point of, oh, this guy, Pierre Plantard, he's going to be the man, he's going to be the king of the New Europe, that to me is ludicrous. I think the Plantard, the Priory of Zion per se, is more smoke and mirrors than it is fact. You can trace it back factually to 1950, because that's when Plantard himself started it. And the Priory of Zion, in terms of the old secret society that may have been preserving the bloodline, I don't think that's the same priory as Pierre Plantard and his cohorts.
Yeah,
you know, and they conveniently claim it's the same.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
And so hundreds of years pass in between. The last time we had any mention of the ancient priory, some document to King James, whatever, right, that mentions the Priory of Zion. And then hundreds of years later, these French characters want to claim that they're the priory because their man wants to claim he's the Merovingian.
Well, I think the reason for that
etc. So that muddies the waters to the real priory.
Well, does it really? They're looking back from a historical standpoint. That they're going on the premises that after Christ was crucified, Mary and a few of the others had to leave because of their life.
Right.
And they actually landed in
Marseille
France.
area of France, right.
And went up into, now if you go into the area between Spain and France today.
Pyrenees area, right.
The Pyrenees area is still there.
Yep.
And the Pyrenees people themselves are so much schooled into this it'll scare you to death, really.
Yeah.
Now, why in your studies, when you were growing up in your faith, why wasn't the Maccabees and all of this brought out? Why wasn't this? Why didn't they do studies on this? And why weren't they? Why?
See, it's inconvenient to their picture of history.
Well, it seems to me that somebody wanted to keep a lot of things quiet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They didn't want to stir any pots. Now, whether this Pierre
Plantard
had anything to do with that bloodline or not, I don't know. I think the bloodline of the Holy Grail is a good connection, in my opinion. But there's no proof on it, obviously. But somebody says, well, there's no proof on it. But there's no proof that it isn't.
Right.
So I can go both ways.
It's a convenient, you know, one of my.
But the Priory of Zion today, I don't know if I'd want to get too flippant with that one.
Oh yeah.
Because I got a feeling there's more to it than you might think.
Well, the guys, see, the thing is, Plantard had two main co-conspirators, right? One of which was a guy who later admitted to forging the so-called priory documents that the HBHG Lincoln, the main guy, Lincoln, found in the Bibliothèque Nationale, right? And they essentially forged the documents that made a direct link between the Plantard priory and the so-called ancient priory. They admitted to concocting the whole list of Grand Masters. Right? In an attempt to fool the French into backing Plantard for their political scheme, which actually had nothing to do with the Mary Magdalene bloodline. Plantard himself later went on the radio and denied that.
I know, but...
Because he said, how can you connect Mary Magdalene to the Merovingians?
Yeah, but one of the best intelligence movement is disinformation.
Well, that's another thing, too. I agree. You got to be very careful.
So you got to really be careful with it. You know, it's kind of like in the books they bring out also in the same breath, Opus Dei.
Yeah, Opus Dei, right,
now,
of course.
Now, the average person's never heard of that.
It's a real organization, no doubt.
And it's a real organization.
Do they have albino assassin monks out to...
Well, when I lived in New York, I walked by their headquarters all the time.
Right.
On Park Avenue. They're there.
See, now here, Larry, this to me is the key, okay? Ben Franklin talked about the danger of what he called the fact-fiction principle. Give you an example to the Priory of Zion connections, right? Fact, Leonardo da Vinci was a mysterious character who left codes in his paintings. Fact, those codes have a strong John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, revisionist Christianity to them.
Very heavy.
Possible fiction, it's because he was the head of the Priory of Zion. You see, you can't deny the painting codes, can't deny his radical anti-church Christianity, but does that mean it's because he was the leader of the Priory of Zion, just because a document that shows up hundreds of years later admitted to be a forgery?
No, I think the reason for it is he got a lot of his money from the church.
Well,
and the church at that time was a no-no for him to come out and say Mary Magdalene was married to Jesus and all this and that. I mean, they'd had his head on a stake.
But see, my point is that the codes, his anti-establishment views of history, etc., all that could just be Leonardo's personal, artistic, genius, esoteric crusade, and it may not have anything to do with so-called the Priory of Zion, him being the Grand Master of that time.
Well, it's kind of like the old adage goes, we won't know until you ask him.
Well, that's it. You don't know.
And you can't ask him. So all you can do is try to give some kind of an educational guess.
Well, that's true.
Now, the educational guess when it comes to Leonardo da Vinci, to me, is the fact that he was playing both ends from the middle.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to starve to death.
Right.
And he was doing a lot of church work.
Right.
At the same time, he had this loyalty over there that he knew something that the church wasn't letting out.
Right.
And I really feel, why did the church, you got to understand too, that Jesus Christ wasn't classified, and the Holy Trinity wasn't classified as all in one until 400 years after.
Right. Constantine.
Now all of a sudden, Jesus is holier than thou.
Uh-huh.
But the church did that. Why did it take 400 years to do that? Why did the church allow the modern day, and when I say modern, I'm talking about the mid-1800s to now, to allow Mary Magdalene to be depicted as a whore?
They had a political reason.
And they knew that she wasn't.
Right.
And there was a Catholic priest on not too long ago who came out and said, no, she wasn't.
Right.
And we have known that for a long time. Well, then why did they permit that to be? Again, disinformation.
Indeed.
Why are they doing this? It's not what they've said, it's what you haven't said.
Well, that's almost like, you can almost, that type of, let's say negative proof. In other words, it doesn't prove your theory, but it does prove that the establishment view is probably not correct.
Something is not right.
Right.
Two and two's not coming out.
Something stinks there.
That's right. Two and two don't come forward. Okay.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And you see now, it's interesting too, getting back to the hierarchy now for just 1 minute. Those guys in the hierarchy, they make a few interesting connections. First of all, I don't buy their whole scrolls of Jesus, Shroud of Turin. Oh, the Shroud of Turin was really Jacques de Molay, and here we're going to go on for 3 chapters with diagrams about why we think so. I really don't care about the Shroud of Turin, right? That's just me. But what they do is they make some interesting points about the mythology of the discovery in the vault. Okay? They say that they were researching this whole vault connection, and they came across the Holy Royal Arch mythology book, telling what the storyline in the Royal Arch is. Finding the pillar, finding the keystone, pulling it back, going into the vault, finding the pillar with the secret name of God written on it, right? And they say that in the Royal Arch mythology, it actually can't be referring to the second temple attempt. In other words, in the Royal Arch storyline as we're given, the thing is you are supposed to be one of the Babylonian exiles returning to the ruins. You find the vault, etc. Right?
The vault that they find was originally the first vault.
Right. So that it's the second temple ruins supposedly. But Knight and Lomas make a good point in that in the ritual you pull back the keystone of an arch to get into the vault. The keystone arch did not exist until the Greco-Roman times, right? So it didn't exist at the time of the Babylonian exile. Therefore, they must actually in code be referring to the Knights Templar digging up the ruins of the Second Temple,
Yeah.
and the whole idea is that the Holy Royal Arch storyline, though it claims to be about the Babylonian exiles finding the vault, is really so-called about the Knights Templar finding the vault, because the Knights Templar are the ones who would have found the arch.
It's all symbolic.
It is all, see now this is again, is it allegory? Is it fact?
It's a combination of both.
And how do you discern between the two?
It's all a combination.
Right.
And I think I think it leaves it up to the interpreter at that time at that point to say, okay, this is the way I believe it.
Right.
Either way you believe doesn't really basically change the thoughts. If you stop and think about it.
Well, see, now that
Whether they get the keystone out of the first temple, second temple, or whenever, does it really change the story that they want to get across to you from a psychological standpoint of how you should conduct your life and so on.
in terms of the people who concocted the ritual,
doesn't
it doesn't
really-
matter.
No, it doesn't
However, to Knight and Low Mass hundreds of years later, trying to decode the reason,
That's right.
it seems to be the big revelation. that
Because
makes
they're
everything
historians.
fit. Right. And the thing is, too, now, here we have this question. I talked about this with Peter. Is it an act of creation or discovery when you answer the unanswered question? In other words, there are certain questions going back to why do we have the arch symbolism? Why do we have that mark? Why all these things exist? We know what exists, what the rituals and symbols are, but we don't know the why. And Peter's answer is, essentially, there is no why. And really it develops organically by people interacting with the symbolism over the centuries, depending on what's needed at the time. They concoct a new order. Later on, that order needs a regalia, needs a tracing board, so somebody else entirely comes up with the Royal Arch tracing board, for example, but he may not have anything to do with the people who originally were designing the Royal Arch degree, and so his official so-called board, which is now hundreds of years later from our point of view, appears to be the Royal Arch board. It's actually not. It's a board that's been adopted enough so that it appears official.
Which is fine.
But there is no real answer. That's the point. There's no official
Well, they're not
explanation.
supposed to be.
And so that leaves it up to interpretation.
But I think people try to dig into it too much, and they try to analyze it too much. For the simple, it isn't. If you look at the aprons that they used 100 years ago versus today, different. It's like automobiles.
Right.
Each one is different. It's still an automobile, but the automobile brings on a different message today than what it did 50 years ago. Well, it's the same way with organizations.
Right.
And how you depict certain things. So all it's doing is enhancing what you're trying to get across in a different way. And I think that's what the regalia is all about in the beginning. You don't really need, just like we use a different regalia than the Scottish Rite, they use the white.
Right.
Okay, now, there's something to say for both. But they're both done in a different way, but they're both going the same direction. It's like religion.
Yeah.
They all talk about how to get to heaven. They're just saying, well, this is the best way to go. And you don't say, well, this is the best way to go. But when you analyze it all out, it all comes down to the same.
Right.
So it's just a different way of doing it.
See, what's interesting here, and this is something, it's the idea of an idea or interpretation is, somebody comes up with it for their own reasons. Then it's quoted again, quoting the person who quoted them, quoting the person who quoted the person who quoted it, to the point where it becomes something entirely different.
Yeah.
Right? And this has happened with the Knights Templar all over the place.
Well, see,
with the mythology, with the interpretations, conspiracy theories leading to the present day. So much
I understand
of it,
all that, but just like the Scottish Rite in the States, up until the 70s, everyone who went into the Masons got a copy of Albert Pike.
Yeah.
Morals
and Dogma.
Yeah. But they've stopped it. Now why?
Because it was selling one man's version as the version, almost.
Well,
Pike's
I
version
wouldn't
was
say,
so definitive.
but so what? When you read the Bible, what are you reading?
Well,
one person's...
supposedly the Holy Spirit prevents that effect from damaging the message, right?
Who said the Holy Spirit didn't give Albert Pike the power to write what he wrote?
Well, that's a good point. I agree with that.
See?
But
my point is, it's a very good book. It has good documentations. He doesn't say, this is the way it is. He says, this is the way I feel, because that's what...
And if you can come up with a different explanation, go ahead. But
well, dogma means my opinion.
Right.
It doesn't mean this is my indoctrination into it. It says dogma, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means my opinion. It's what I...
That's so interesting, because dogma has come to mean the rule of law.
And it isn't, because the dictionary still says opinion.
Right.
This is the way I believe. Now, he's only writing down what he believes. Now, it's up to you to read that and say, okay, I agree with this, I agree with that, but I don't agree with that, which is fine. But you've got a basis of something there that I think a man who wrote it in 1871, or I think it was 1871, because the Civil War was so devastating to the United States, and father against father and son against son, that here's a man who came in and wrote this and gave such inspiration on what he wrote in the various degrees, and for us to ignore that just because the modern day says, well, we're taking one person's idea. I think that's garbage. I think it's garbage.
If he's correct, it doesn't matter whether or not it was his idea. Is that what you're saying?
It doesn't make any difference. It's a good book.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people says, okay, well, you talk to atheists and they don't believe in God. Well, that's fine. If that's their opinion. Right. That's what dogma's about.
Yeah.
That's their opinion.
Right.
Now, I can take some of the things that they say and say, well, you got a good point, but, well, it's the same thing with it. But I think it was such a good book, and I think it's a crime that they have not continued giving that book out. Because I read it all the time, and I keep reading it, because every time I read it, I get new things out of it again. Because you can't just read it and take the surface, because it's not there.
Right.
The man had a lot of foresight. He was a very deep person, and he was a very religious person. And his degrees come out very religious. And maybe that's why they've stopped it. Because back in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, it seemed like the whole world was this way, is religion is kind of a dirty word.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's,
sanitize it into something else.
Let's,
as long as we take the religion out of it, we can talk about religion.
That's right. And I think what they've done too is that they've become politically correct.
That's exactly.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have done that. And I totally think that they should take a hard look at it and reinstitute it.
Now, getting back now to the Templar mythology, okay? This is something that is when you look behind the origin of some of this mythology, it's actually quite shocking where some of it comes from, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Now, the typical thing that we hear in a lot of these books, Hiram Key's the best example, Second Messiah, their next book, even more clearly, is the idea of the mythology of the Templars digging up the vault, and the fact that, a few knights couldn't have been just guarding the road, therefore they must have been digging up the vault, therefore they must, and what it is though, here's the thing, there was a Knights Templar Rosicrucian offshoot, quasi-Masonic offshoot, that turned into an apocalyptic UFO cult. It was called the Order of the Solar Temple, okay? And these guys were around for a while, 70s, 80s. They were operating mainly in France, Monaco, and Canada. They actually had Princess Grace of Monaco indoctrinated into their secret Rosicrucian type order. They believed they were based on the real Knights Templar, okay? And they encountered a lot of resistance from official so-called Masonic organizations initially. This is before they went off the wall and became a suicide cult. Initially, they encountered a lot of resistance. They were saying, well, you're not a real Knights Templar. You're just a bunch of guys dressing up like the Knights Templar and claiming a lineage. We're the real Knights Templar. That's what the English were saying to them. And so in response to that, one of the members of the Solar Temple, a French guy named Guitien de la Forge, he concocts a pamphlet. Essentially, it's his propaganda pamphlet saying, look, since we don't know about what the Templars really were, and since it's obvious that they weren't just protecting the roads, he's actually the first person to say this in the modern era, in the late 70s. Therefore, there must have been excavations, and they must have been digging up artifacts, and we, the Order of the Solar Temple, know what those artifacts were. He's claiming. Now, he doesn't say this in his pamphlet, okay? The pamphlet was written just for the academic critics who were claiming you can't be real Templars, right? And the pamphlet circulated, and it makes essentially the claim that anybody who can understand the Templar mythology better has a better claim, right?
Hello?
How are you?
All right, keep talking.
And so what happens is, De La Forge's pamphlet, which has no basis in fact, it's just his opinion about some of the Templars. Well, it's written to support his cult's view, and the crazy thing is that the cult's view was that the Templars found in the vault secret documents proving that human beings were created by aliens from Sirius, and that if you become a Knights Templar and then burn to death in a fire, you're going to be reincarnated as one of these Sirius beings. That's the reason they started this modern revision.
Yeah, but you got to be careful though with the Rosicrucians. There's several Rosicrucian cults out there.
Yeah,
I happen to belong to the Rosicrucians, but it's a total different one because the Rosicrucians that I belong to only will go go after members in the Masons. You have to be a Mason to go to the Rosicrucians, and I'm in. So they only subscribe to the Masons.
Right.
So the Rosicrucians, there is the original Rosicrucian that I belong to came out of Germany. Okay, and so I know where you're coming from on the cult thing.
Now, but what happens? So this is even, just wait a second. What's even more interesting? De La Forge's pamphlet, okay, gets circulated. Graham Hancock quotes it in his book, The Sign and the Seal, because he's trying to say that the Templars found the Ark of the Covenant and brought it, the whole connection to Ethiopia, etc. So Hancock, who's more scholarly, quotes De La Forge saying, look, they must have been excavating, right? Then Hancock is quoted by Knight and Lomas as if De La Forge is some reputable historian who knows what the Templars are really doing, when in fact he's a whacked-out cult propagandist.
I didn't get that message.
By
I didn't get that from Lomas.
Well, Lomas and Knight in Second Messiah are quoting Hancock. Hancock is saying, French historian De La Forge, who revealed the fact that they really were excavating.
But I didn't, I thought you were saying that Lomas and they were backing this guy from the Rosicrucian.
They didn't even know they were backing him. They were backing Hancock's quoting of him.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there's no looking into where the mythology comes from. And the fact is, it's picked up by Hancock, picked up by Knight and Lomas, and then now it's become almost the official real story that the Templars did find such and such, when we don't know what the real story was. And it's a very, very dangerous propaganda action. But one last question then. I know you have to go, but you say, as a Roman Catholic, you don't have any problem reconsidering the basic fundamentals that the Holy Bloodline theory would create?
No.
Because,
why should you?
Well, a lot of Catholics have a big problem with it, because it calls into question the dogma of Catholicism.
A lot of Methodists would have a lot of problems with it too.
That's true.
Wouldn't be just the Catholics.
So,
let's put it this way. The whole Christian religion would have a problem with it. Not just the Catholics. It's all Christian religions, regardless of whether you're Baptist, Methodist, Anglican, or whatever, would have a problem with that.
But you don't have a problem with it
because I do not allow a religion to cloud my thinking. I still must be a free thinker. I cannot allow people to dictate to me.
So you're not trapped in the past.
I'm not trapped in the past, and nobody should be. But unfortunately, the majority of the people are. You see, and they will not open their minds.
If they apply dogma in the original sense and not the co-opted sense.
And I apply it in the original sense. Say, I don't go with this other stuff.
All right. Well, Larry, thank you very much.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
And we'll get me in the Knights Templar as soon as I get back.
Oh yeah, I'll get that thing for you.
All right.